The Boeing 737 glided over the Rockies like a silver bird skimming a sea of clouds. The sun had begun its descent, casting streaks of orange and gold across the horizon, painting the peaks below in fiery brilliance. Passengers gazed out of the oval windows, snapping photos, lost in the quiet hum of an ordinary flight. The smell of coffee, the rustle of snack bags, the soft murmur of conversations, everything seemed normal. Flight attendants moved gracefully down the aisles, offering drinks and smiles, their uniforms crisp, their faces calm. In seat 14A, Emma Jensen pressed her forehead to the cool glass, eyes tracing the jagged mountain ridges far below. At 11, she had flown before, of course, but mostly on short family trips, nothing compared to the altitude now, nothing compared to the hum of 30,000 feet and the eerie weight of the world beneath them. She could feel the vibrations through her legs, through the soles of her shoes, a subtle pulse that matched the heartbeat of the airplane itself. "Would you like a soda, Emma?" her mother asked. Leaning over from seat 14B, she had a gentle smile, the kind parents wear to mask exhaustion after a long day. Emma nodded, distracted, her mind somewhere far away, counting the instruments she could see through the cockpit window as the pilots adjusted dials, their movements precise. And then something snapped the illusion of normalcy. A muffled thump echoed from the cockpit, so subtle at first that only Emma noticed. Her gaze shifted instantly, tracing the metallic door, listening. Then another thump followed by silence, silence that felt deafening. The usual hum of conversation in the cabin seemed to dull, passengers pausing mid-sip, mid-laugh. A flight attendant glanced toward the cockpit and frowned. "Captain," she called, voice steady but with a tremor beneath it. Nothing. Panic is slow at first, creeping in like a shadow at dusk. Then it grows, quickening with every heartbeat. Emma's mother stiffened, eyes widening. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. A man in the row ahead leaned forward, tapping the intercom button. "Cockpit, are you there?" No answer. The hum of the engines remained, mechanical and indifferent, but the human heartbeat had vanished from the front of the plane. Emma didn't move, didn't speak. Something inside her shifted, an instinct, honed through hours of simulation games, YouTube tutorials, and her relentless fascination with flight. Most kids her age might have curled up in terror, but Emma felt a surge of clarity. The hum of the plane, the blinking lights from the overhead panel, the faint digital readings on the side screens, they all spoke to her in ways she didn't fully understand, yet knew she could act on. The flight attendants exchanged a glance heavy with unspoken fear. One, younger and trembling, murmured, "What do we do?" A veteran attendant shook her head, eyes darting to the cockpit door. We call for help." The intercom buzzed with static as she pressed the button, voice shaking. "Cockpit, Captain, are you okay?" Still nothing. Emma rose from her seat, a quiet determination settling over her small frame. The aisle seemed impossibly long, the murmur of frightened passengers fading as she moved forward. Her mother reached for her, voice catching, "Emma, wait, don't." But Emma kept walking, her sneakers padding softly on the carpet. Flight attendants stepped forward, trying to block her path, hands hovering near her shoulders, unsure whether to stop her or let instinct guide this strange child. The cockpit door loomed ahead, gleaming in the dim cabin light. Behind it, Emma could hear faint groans, the shallow, uneven breaths of both pilots slumped over their controls. One hand still rested near the throttle, fingers twitching weakly, the other limp against the dashboard. Their faces were pale, lips slightly parted, eyes closed, or perhaps starring, unseeing, Emma couldn't tell. Time stretched. Every second felt like a lifetime. Passengers began to murmur, whispers spreading like wildfire. "What's happening? Are they okay? Someone do something." Panic coiled in the cabin, but Emma didn't hear it. She only saw the cockpit, the command center of the airplane, where life and death balanced on switches and dials she had studied obsessively. Her hands hovered, trembling slightly, over the polished surface of the yoke, the throttle, the buttons she had only touched in games. She whispered almost to herself, "I think I can fly it." The words were small, fragile, but they carried weight. Flight attendants froze. Emma's mother caught her arm again, eyes wide with terror. "No, Emma, you're just a kid. You can't." Emma shook her head, her gaze unwavering. "I know, but someone has to. Her voice carried a calm that contrasted sharply with the chaos around her, and for a moment the cabin fell into stunned silence. Passengers watched, unsure whether to intervene or believe. An older man muttered under his breath, "Shika," but even he didn't stop her. The turbulence began to grow, a subtle shaking at first, then stronger, like the plane itself was testing their nerves. Lights flickered along the aisles, snack carts swayed slightly, and the low hum of the engines became a bass note against the growing roar of anxiety. Inside the cockpit, Emma's hands finally rested on the yoke. She glanced at the instruments, altitude, airspeed, engine output, and a strange calm filled her chest. She could do this. She had to. Outside, the mountains stretched like a jagged chessboard, indifferent to the drama unfolding above them. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that reached across the cabin and seemed to touch each passenger, reminding them of how thin the line was between safety and disaster. Then, as if punctuating the fear in the air, the cockpit door alarm buzzed sharply, a warning she didn't fully understand but instinctively felt mattered. The plane gave a subtle lurch, a reminder that gravity, speed, and life were entwined in ways she couldn't ignore. She inhaled, small chest rising, eyes flicking between instruments she knew and controls she had only touched in pretend scenarios. "Emma," her mother's voice trembled through the door. "Please do." But Emma pressed forward, determined, heart racing, mind calculating, fingers poised over switches that could save or doom them all. Flight attendants clutched rails, passengers held breaths, and somewhere above the clouds, the plane waited for the next move that would determine everything. Emma sat down in the pilot's seat, her legs dangling, palms flat against the yoke. Her breath hitched slightly. She had never flown at this altitude in reality. She had never faced a real emergency like this. And yet, she felt ready. Because sometimes preparation wasn't just practice, it was instinct, courage, and the refusal to surrender to fear. The cabin held its collective breath. The pilot's body slumped, unresponsive. The mountains below, the clouds around, the empty sky stretching endlessly, nothing mattered but this moment. And in the stillness, the soft click of a switch, the faint whir of instruments reacting to her touch, the plane waited silently, as if knowing a small hand might yet steer it through disaster. And then the intercom crackled. A voice, faint but urgent, echoed through the cabin. "Flight 487. Are you there?" Emma looked at the microphone, her heart pounding. She swallowed hard and whispered, barely audible, yet carrying a gravity far beyond her age. "I am flying the plane." Silence returned, thick, tense, and almost electric, leaving the passengers frozen in disbelief, fear, and awe. Somewhere above the Rockies, the airplane waited. And Emma Jensen, 11 years old, sat in the pilot's seat, ready to take control of fate. The cockpit felt impossibly vast from Emma's small perspective. Her hands barely reached the throttle, her legs swung above the floor, and the hum of instruments buzzed in her ears like a living thing. Flight attendants pressed against the door, unsure whether to intervene or step back. Passengers craned their necks to catch a glimpse, faces pale, mouths slightly open. Fear rippled through the cabin like electricity, but Emma didn't hear it, not fully. Her mind was focused, scanning screens, reading dials, trying to make sense of altitude, speed, and course. She had never flown for real, not like this. Every simulator video she'd watched, every game she had played had prepared her for emergency scenarios, but never for the pressure of knowing real lives depended on her next move. And yet, she remembered every detail, every instruction from tutorials and lessons she had soaked in for hours on end. Slowly, deliberately, she moved the yoke, listening to the subtle change in engine sound, feeling the vibration shift beneath her fingertips. The plane shuddered, responding to her touch. A soft gasp escaped her lips. "It's working. I'm doing it," she thought, adrenaline firing in her veins. She adjusted the trim, a concept she had only studied in diagrams, and felt the aircraft level slightly. Outside, clouds streaked past, sunlight glinting off ice crystals. A sudden turbulence rolled the cabin, sending soda cups spilling and bags sliding across aisles. Passengers screamed softly, gripping each other or the armrests. Emma's mother hovered just behind the cockpit door, tears streaking her face. "You can't do this alone," she shouted, voice breaking. Emma turned, eyes meeting her mother. "I'm not alone," she whispered. "They're still guiding me." Air traffic control's voice crackled over the radio. "Flight 487, we read you. Are you in control?" Emma's fingers hovered over the transmit button. She pressed it, heart hammering. I'm flying the plane. The pilots, they're unconscious." Static. Then the controller's voice returned, sharp, urgent, but strangely calming. "Copy that. We'll guide you through this. Listen carefully, follow our instructions exactly. We'll get you down safely." Emma swallowed hard, gripping the yoke with both hands. The voice on the other end was her lifeline, a tether to reason in a cabin full of panic. Behind her, the pilots' bodies remained slumped, their faces ghostly pale. She couldn't comprehend what had happened to them: food poisoning, fainting, or something far worse. The thought made her stomach tight, but she pushed it aside. She had a plane to fly. People were counting on her. "All right," the controller continued, voice calm but insistent. "We need you to reduce your altitude gradually. Look at your altimeter and slowly bring us down to 25,000 feet." Emma glanced at the instruments, adjusting the throttle with trembling hands. The plane dipped slightly, causing a ripple of anxiety through the cabin. Passengers gasped and clutched at their seats. A man shouted, "What's happening?" Emma heard, but her focus was absolute. One wrong move could mean catastrophe. Her fingers moved over switches, flipping flaps, adjusting trim, easing the plane downward in careful increments. The controller guided her patiently. "Good. Now maintain heading 270, keep the airspeed steady." Emma nodded, even though he couldn't see her. She had memorized compass directions and the basic principles of flight: turning, climbing, descending, and she applied them with the precision of someone twice her age. The turbulence hit again, harder this time, tossing a few passengers from side to side. A soft scream broke from a woman in the back. Children began crying. The cabin shook violently. Emma felt a flash of panic, but she pushed it down, digging deep, focusing only on the yoke, the instruments, the flight path. Her hands became steady, deliberate. Her small fingers moved almost automatically over the switches, guided by instinct and the memory of endless hours in front of a screen. A soft click, a subtle whir, and the plane leveled out. Emma exhaled, relief fleeting as another challenge arose. The fuel gauge read slightly lower than normal. A warning light blinked red, and she realized that in addition to flying, she now had to manage the plane's systems. "Emma," a flight attendant's voice called from the doorway, quivering. "There's a storm ahead. Lightning, high winds." Emma turned her eyes to the radar screen. White and red blips moved across the green display: turbulence, storms, the dangerous kind she had only seen in simulations. Her stomach dropped, but she pressed on. "I can avoid it," she whispered. Hands flying over the controls, she adjusted the heading slightly, angling toward a gap in the storm cells. Outside, clouds roiled, lightning illuminating the cabin in harsh, stark bursts. Passengers screamed again, gripping each other in terror. The plane shook violently. Emma's mother grabbed the seat beside her, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Oh my God," she whispered, as if speaking aloud might break reality. Emma's heart pounded. "Steady, steady, don't panic." "Keep climbing slightly," the controller instructed over the radio. "Avoid that cell. You're doing great, just focus on the instruments." Emma adjusted the throttle, feeling the aircraft respond. The plane's nose lifted slightly, engines whining, wings flexing against the wind. She had done this in simulations hundreds of times, but never under this kind of pressure. The adrenaline burned in her veins, her palms slick with sweat. And yet, a strange calmness settled over her, a clarity she didn't fully understand. Passengers in the cabin began whispering, fear mingled with awe. One man, voice barely audible, said, "She's actually doing it." Another woman clutched her child, murmuring prayers. The cabin lights flickered as the plane rocked through turbulent clouds. Emma's hands shook slightly, but she steadied them, eyes locked on the horizon through the cockpit window. Then another jolt. The plane dropped hundreds of feet suddenly, throwing everyone forward. Emma yelped but caught the yoke in time. Heart racing, she whispered. "Not yet, we're not done yet." The controller's voice guided her through emergency maneuvers, her fingers dancing across switches and dials like a miniature concert pianist, every movement precise, deliberate. A soft ding alerted her to another warning: landing gear. She had never deployed it mid-flight, never prepared for an emergency landing. But she remembered tutorials, diagrams, simulations. Slowly, carefully, she moved the lever, listening to the reassuring clunk of hydraulics. She was flying, not just controlling a plane but orchestrating survival itself. Passengers were silent now, watching her, holding breaths collectively. Flight attendants whispered encouragements, tension etched into every line of their faces. Emma glanced back at her mother. Their eyes met, a fleeting moment of connection, of understanding. "We're going to be okay, maybe." The plane leveled again. The storm raged around them, lightning illuminating the cockpit like a strobe light. Emma's hands were steady, her mind focused. She was no longer just a girl playing a flight simulator. She was the pilot now. Lives were in her hands and she would not fail. But somewhere in the distance, a low rumble of engines groaning beneath stress reminded her that this was only the beginning. The real challenge, the descent, the landing, was still ahead. And as the plane sliced through turbulent skies at 30,000 feet, Emma Jensen realized the world below, full of mountains, clouds, and endless sky, would not forgive mistakes. Not here, not now. And in that moment, as lightning flashed outside, passengers stared in awe and terror, and the controllers guided her over the radio. Emma clenched the yoke, whispering to herself, "I've got this. I have to." Storm outside intensified, the sky turning a bruised violet, clouds crashing and roiling like boiling water. Emma's small hands clung to the yoke, knuckles white. Her stomach churned, and yet her eyes were sharp, scanning every instrument, every gauge, every warning light. The plane pitched violently to the left, tossing a few passengers forward in their seats. A scream rang out from the back row. Emma felt the familiar grip of panic start to creep in, but she pushed it down with sheer force of will. "I have to do this. I can't fail." Air traffic control's voice crackled through the headset, strained but firm. "Flight 487, turbulence severe. Keep heading steady. Altitude stable. Engines, check engine readings. We'll guide you through this." Emma adjusted the throttle carefully, listening to the roar of the engines. One of the warning lights blinked persistently, a subtle, ominous reminder that something was wrong. Her mind raced through everything she had learned in videos, tutorials, and simulation games, trying to match theory to reality. She touched the emergency checklist printed faintly on a card taped to the side of the console, a cheat sheet she had memorized just days before, almost as a game. Now, it was her lifeline. Passengers whispered, some in fear, some in awe, as the plane trembled with every bolt of lightning outside. Flight attendants pressed against the cockpit door, shouting, "You've got this, Emma. Follow the instructions. We believe in you." The words, meant to calm, barely pierced the storm of adrenaline in her veins, yet somehow steadied her hands. A sudden lurch threw the plane violently downward. Emma yelped, her stomach flipping. She instinctively pulled the yoke back, lifting the nose. The plane groaned in protest, engines whining, and a shriek of metal echoed softly from the wings. Lightning flashed, illuminating the cockpit in a stark white light, revealing the pilots slumped unconscious, their faces pale and still. Emma swallowed hard, her fingers trembling slightly as she read the instruments. "Level the wings, maintain heading, steady speed." Behind her, the flight attendants clutched the doorframe, their faces etched with terror. "She's actually flying it," whispered one, voice barely audible. Passengers were frozen, holding hands, gripping seatbacks, some praying silently, others silently sobbing. The storm seemed alive, a wall of wind, rain, and thunder pressing against the plane, testing her in every possible way. "Emma," the controller said over the radio, voice tense, "we need you to reduce speed slightly and maintain altitude. You're approaching a crosswind zone. Don't overcorrect. We've got your 6. Listen carefully." She nodded, though the controller couldn't see her. Hands shaking, she adjusted the throttle, feeling the engine's whine in protest. The plane tilted dangerously as gusts pushed it sideways. Emma gritted her teeth. Stay calm, stay calm. Her small fingers danced over buttons and switches, adjusting trim, flaps, and stabilizers with a precision that belied her age. The passengers' murmurs escalated into audible gasps as the plane rocked violently again, lightning illuminating their wide, terrified eyes. Somewhere behind her, a child cried, clutching a mother's arm. Emma's heart squeezed painfully. She could feel every heartbeat, every tremor of fear in the cabin, yet she pushed it aside. Fear was a tool, a signal, not a master. "Emma, you're doing amazing," the controller encouraged. "We need to prepare for descent. There's a storm front ahead. You'll need to reduce altitude to 20,000 feet in a controlled glide. Follow my instructions precisely." Her palms were sweaty, but she nodded, fingers moving instinctively. Slowly, carefully, she adjusted the throttle and tilted the yoke, feeling the plane respond. Another jolt threw her forward. She gritted her teeth. Not now, not yet. The cabin rocked, passengers gasping, the flight attendants bracing themselves against the bulkhead. Every second was an eternity, every movement a test of skill, nerve, and courage. Lightning struck close enough to make the windows glow with heat. The plane quivered violently. Emma swallowed hard and whispered, "We can do this. We have to." The roar of the engines and the crack of thunder merged into one overwhelming, deafening cacophony, yet she focused, reading instruments like a living manual, listening to the controller, and adjusting the plane's delicate balance. Another warning light blinked, engine temperature rising. Panic threatened to creep back. She pressed a few buttons, switching fuel lines and adjusting throttle. The engine whined, settling slightly. She exhaled slowly, feeling a spark of relief before the next challenge arrived, the descent. "Emma, you're approaching the mountain ridge at your current altitude," the controller warned. "We need a coordinated descent. Look at your vertical speed indicator. Do not exceed safe limits. You can do this. Focus. We're guiding you every step." Emma's pulse thundered in her ears. She had studied descent procedures, emergency landings, and crosswind corrections, but never in reality, never with lives in the balance. Her eyes flicked to the vertical speed indicator, then to the radar, then back to the yoke. She pressed the throttle forward slightly, nudging the nose downward. The plane responded, shaking violently as it descended. A scream echoed from the cabin. Lightning flashed again, and for a brief moment, Emma saw her reflection in the windshield. Pale, wide-eyed hair sticking to her forehead from sweat. And yet there was determination there, fierce and unwavering. She whispered, "Not now, I'm not done." Behind her, flight attendants clutched at the cockpit doorframe. "Keep going, Emma, you've got this," one shouted. Passengers gripped each other, bracing for impact, hoping this tiny girl could somehow navigate them through the storm. The plane dipped, wavered, and slowly stabilized. Emma adjusted trim, slowly leveling the wings, listening to the engine notes, feeling every vibration through the yoke. Then a sudden warning bell. The landing gear was not down. Emma froze, heart pounding. She had memorized deployment sequences, but executing them mid-storm at altitude added a new layer of complexity. A glance at the checklist reassured her, and she pulled the lever. Hydraulic sounds echoed through the fuselage. "Please work," she whispered. The gear indicator clicked green. Relief washed over her, brief and electric. The storm still raged, the wind and rain lashing at the plane. The descent continued. Lightning illuminated the cockpit, the passengers, the terror etched on every face. Emma's stomach twisted, but she held firm. Every control she touched, every adjustment she made was a lifeline. One wrong move could send them all tumbling into the mountains below. The controller's voice crackled urgently. "You're doing great, Emma. Keep heading steady. Watch the instruments. We're preparing the runway for emergency landing. You're almost there." Emma nodded, lips pressed in a tight line. She could see faint glimmers of runway lights through the storm, blurred, distant, tantalizingly close yet terrifyingly far. Another jolt hit the plane, pitching it sideways. Emma instinctively twisted the yoke, correcting just in time. The cabin erupted in frightened gasps. The plane shuddered, groaned, and then leveled. She exhaled, hands trembling slightly. For a brief moment she allowed herself to think, we might actually make it. But then, a subtle, ominous vibration in the left engine reminded her that the storm wasn't finished, that danger wasn't over, and that landing a plane in these conditions would demand every ounce of courage, focus, and skill she possessed. Emma glanced back at her mother, who clutched the doorway, tears streaming. Their eyes met, and a silent understanding passed between them. We're not done. Not yet. Outside, lightning continued to tear across the sky, illuminating the plane as it carved a path through chaos. Emma Jensen, 11 years old, gripped the yoke with small but unyielding hands, heart hammering, mind razor-sharp. The descent had begun. The storm would not yield, and the plane, full of terrified passengers, depended entirely on her. For the first time, she whispered not to herself but to the world, "Hold on, we're coming down, and we're going to make it." Plane trembled, a living creature battered by the storm. Emma's small hands gripped the yoke with white-knuckled determination. Her eyes darted from the altimeter to the radar, to the storm outside, a shifting wall of gray and violet, lightning slicing through it like jagged knives. Every movement of the plane sent a shiver through the cabin. Passengers clutched each other in terror, some sobbing quietly, some whispering frantic prayers. Flight attendants braced themselves, whispers of encouragement barely audible over the roar of engines and rain. Air traffic control's voice crackled again, urgent but calm. "Flight 487, you're approaching the final approach corridor. The crosswinds are strong, maintain heading 270. Keep airspeed steady. You're doing excellent. Listen carefully, line up with the runway markers when visible. You can do this." Emma swallowed, heart hammering like a drum in her chest. Final approach, the words echoed in her mind. She had memorized landing procedures in simulations, but never like this. Never with real lives depending on her. Never with an 11-year-old's hands barely reaching the controls and a storm threatening to rip the plane from the sky. The plane jolted violently as a gust of wind caught the left wing. Emma instinctively twisted the yoke, fighting the pull, feeling the vibration reverberate through her small body. Behind her, the cabin shook, screams piercing the thunder. She could hear her mother's ragged breathing as she leaned near the cockpit door, tears streaking her face. "Emma, you're doing it," whispered a flight attendant, voice shaking. Another added, "Keep steady, just like the instructor said, you've got this." Emma's hands moved instinctively, adjusting flaps, monitoring airspeed and checking altitude. The crosswinds were stronger than anything she had ever simulated. Lightning illuminated the cabin in stark, terrifying bursts, revealing wide eyes of fear and awe. Somewhere behind her, a child whimpered, clinging to a parent's arm. She felt a surge of responsibility unlike anything she had ever known. "Emma," the controller's voice cut through the storm, urgent now, "you need to deploy the landing gear fully and prepare for a touch-and-go if the first attempt fails. Watch your descent rate. Do not exceed 2,000 feet per minute. Keep calm, we're with you." Her fingers hovered over the landing gear lever, trembling. She pulled it down, hearing the soft whir of hydraulics as the wheels locked into place. The gear warning light finally clicked off. Relief washed over her briefly, but there was no time to celebrate. The runway lights flickered through the haze of rain, a distant line of hope. Emma's eyes narrowed. Almost there, just a little further, she adjusted the throttle, nudged the nose, and kept the wings level. The plane pitched slightly to the right as another gust slammed into the left wing. Her stomach dropped. Passengers screamed, bracing themselves. The flight attendants clutched the cockpit doorway for balance. Emma's mother, white-knuckled, whispered, "You've got this. I know you can do it." Emma's lips trembled, but she forced herself to nod. "Throttle steady, flaps down, maintain heading." The controller's voice guided her like a lifeline through the chaos. The plane descended further. Raindrops lashed against the windshield and lightning illuminated the cockpit in blinding flashes. Emma adjusted the trim, trying to counteract the turbulent winds. The plane shuddered violently, almost tipping. Her heart skipped. She pressed the yoke forward, lifted it back, trying to find the balance between overcorrecting and letting the plane drift dangerously. A sudden jolt threw the cabin forward. A woman screamed, clutching her child, nails digging into the armrest. Emma's hands shook, but she stayed focused, forcing herself to remember every step, every lesson, every detail she had studied. "Emma, you're aligned, almost there," the controller said, voice steady though tension bled through. "Keep it steady. You're about 500 feet above the runway. Smooth, controlled descent. Prepare for flare, lift nose slightly just before touchdown." Emma's eyes widened. 500 feet, 500 feet, her tiny hands gripped the yoke. She adjusted the throttle, easing the plane down. Outside, the runway lights grew brighter, cutting through the gray haze of rain. The plane shuddered violently again. A gust of wind slammed into the left wing, tilting the plane dangerously. Emma instinctively countered, twisting the yoke, but the turbulence pushed it back. "No, not now," she whispered. Passengers screamed. Flight attendants braced themselves. Her mother's voice broke through the chaos. "Emma, don't let go, you've got this." Sweat dripped down Emma's temple. She whispered a silent mantra, steady, 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 and slowly, almost impossibly, leveled the plane. The runway lights stretched beneath them like a fragile ribbon of salvation. She adjusted flaps, trimmed the wings, and eased the plane downward. The first contact with the runway jolted everyone violently. Tires screeched against wet tarmac, sparks flew from the undercarriage, and passengers gasped, clutching each other. Emma gritted her teeth, guiding the plane forward, keeping it steady despite the roar of engines and the storm's fury. The plane bounced slightly, then steadied. Emma exhaled, but tension clawed at her chest. Almost, she eased the throttle back, letting the plane slow. The brakes groaned under pressure. Rain sprayed across the windshield like a waterfall. The plane continued its controlled glide down the runway, shuddering under each gust of wind. "Emma, you're doing it, just a little further," the controller encouraged. The plane finally slowed, tires squealing until it rolled to a complete stop. Silence hung for a heartbeat. Then passengers erupted, some screaming with relief, some crying, some hugging each other. Flight attendants rushed to the cockpit, tears streaming, shaking their heads in disbelief. Emma slumped in the seat, exhausted, pale but alive. Her mother rushed forward, scooping her into a trembling embrace. "Oh my God, my brave girl," she whispered, tears soaking Emma's hair. Emma's own tears spilled, a mixture of adrenaline, fear, and relief. She had flown a plane, real lives, real danger, real chaos, and survived. But the storm wasn't done. Lightning continued to flash, rain pounded, and the engines hissed as the plane idled on the runway. Emergency vehicles arrived on the tarmac, lights flashing. Passengers were escorted off, shaken but unharmed. Emma finally stepped out of the cockpit, her small frame trembling, eyes wide with disbelief at what she had just accomplished. And as she looked back at the plane, still steaming, still alive, she realized the full weight of what had happened. She had flown a Boeing 737 at 30,000 feet through a storm that could have ripped it from the sky. She had faced impossible odds, turbulence, crosswinds, and failing engines. And yet, she had survived. For a moment, Emma allowed herself to smile, relief washing over her. But then, a faint warning light from the cockpit blinked, red and insistent, a reminder that even on the ground, danger could strike again in a heartbeat. Somewhere inside, she felt the stirrings of a new resolve. She had faced fear, chaos, and death, and emerged alive. But she also knew this was only the beginning. And somewhere in the storm-swept sky, the thunder rumbled again, a reminder that the skis could never truly be tamed. The plane had finally touched the runway, but the storm had not released its grip. Rain continued to lash the fuselage in relentless sheets, lightning flashing across the sky in blinding bursts. The engines hissed and groaned as Emma guided the aircraft down the wet tarmac, slowing carefully. Even after landing, the danger had not fully passed. Crosswinds pushed against the wings, threatening to pivot the plane like a toy. Emma's small hands gripped the yoke, knuckles white, her heart hammering as if it might escape her chest. Every passenger's gaze was locked on her, some silently praying, others frozen in disbelief. "Emma, you're amazing," whispered a flight attendant, her voice trembling as she braced herself against the cockpit doorframe. "You're actually taxiing the plane. Keep steady. Don't let it get away from you." Emma nodded, even though they could not see her inside the cockpit. She focused entirely on the controls, monitoring speed and direction, carefully guiding the massive machine toward the taxiway. The rain-slicked tarmac reflected the emergency lights like molten glass. Her mother hovered behind her, hands trembling on the doorway, whispering prayers Emma could barely hear over the roar of the storm and the engine's hiss. Passengers were no longer screaming, but silence had given way to tense awe. Eyes were wide, mouths slightly agape. Children clung to parents, gripping hands and knees, watching the small girl who had just defied death at 30,000 feet. Whispers spread through the cabin. "She's a miracle," one man said. "A kid just flew us through a storm," another murmured. Emma focused. The plane's nose wobbled slightly as a gust hit the left wing. She countered instinctively, steering carefully. Stay calm," she muttered under her breath. Each movement was deliberate, precise, every minor correction a battle against nature and gravity. The taxiway appeared ahead through the haze of rain and mist. Emma's pulse raced as she nudged the throttle back slightly, slowing the aircraft further. The first obstacle appeared, a maintenance vehicle, lights flashing, crossed into her path too quickly. Emma's instincts kicked in. She turned the yoke, avoiding the vehicle by mere feet, sending a ripple of gasps through the cabin. Flight attendants clutched the doorway, eyes wide. "Holy God, she just saved us again," one whispered. "Emma, keep heading straight, you've got it," the controller's voice crackled over the radio. "We're guiding ground traffic to clear the way. You're doing perfectly. Just stay focused on the taxiway." Emma nodded, lips pressed tight, eyes darting to the lines painted faintly on the tarmac. The wheels of the plane hissed over puddles, water spraying like tiny geysers. She adjusted the throttle slightly, guiding the plane with gentle taps on the yoke. It was a different kind of flight now, not the soaring heights, not the dramatic descents, but no less dangerous. Any misstep could send the aircraft skidding into the storm-soaked tarmac. Her mother whispered from the doorway, "You've got this, Emma." "Almost there." Emma felt the weight of those words. Almost there. Yet, as she glanced at the runway behind, she realized landing was only the first part. Now came the taxiing, the coordination with ground control, the potential for one tiny mistake to ruin everything. A warning light blinked faintly on the control panel, something about engine pressure. Emma's stomach sank. She had handled the descent, the storm, the landing, but a technical issue now could undo all of it. She glanced at the instrument, her young mind racing to remember what she had learned about engine management. Slowly, carefully, she adjusted the throttle and monitored the gauge. The light flickered and dimmed. Relief washed over her in a shaky rush. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the entire tarmac. Emma's eyes followed the taxiway line, guiding the plane inch by inch toward the designated gate. Rainwater pooled along the edges, reflecting colored lights. The aircraft groaned as it rolled over uneven pavement, a reminder that the plane was heavy, fragile, alive. Passengers whispered, some holding hands tightly, others silent, overwhelmed by adrenaline and awe. "Did she really just fly a plane?" one muttered. "A kid." Another woman shook her head, tears streaking down her cheeks. She saved our lives." Emma's focus never wavered. She was exhausted, palms slick with sweat, heart hammering. She moved the plane toward the gate, slowing carefully as the taxiway curved. The storm's fury continued unabated, and each gust of wind tested her control. She adjusted flaps slightly, shifted trim, and gently nudged the yoke. The plane responded, inching forward. Her mother reached out, a trembling hand resting briefly on her shoulder. "Emma, we're almost there. You can do it," she whispered. Emma gave a small nod, swallowing hard. Almost there, she thought. She had guided them through 30,000 feet of storm-navigated turbulence, crosswinds, and an emergency descent. Now came the final step, a controlled stop at the gate. The plane approached the gate slowly. Emergency crews were in position, lights flashing. Ground personnel waved frantically, signaling her forward. Emma's heart thumped in her chest as she guided the plane closer. She eased the throttle back, feeling the plane respond obediently. The nose aligned with the gate, the tires rolling over wet tarmac. And then a sudden jolt. A small pothole or uneven pavement threw the aircraft slightly off course. Emma's eyes widened. She instinctively twisted the yoke, correcting the deviation, heart racing. The plane groaned, tires squealing but stabilized. Flight attendants gasped. One muttered, "She's a miracle." Finally, the plane came to a stop. The engines idled and the storm still raged, but the aircraft, full of terrified passengers and crew, was safe. Silence hung for a brief moment. Then, a rush of cheers and applause erupted. Passengers hugged, tears streaming, some collapsing into seatbacks in relief. Emma's mother rushed into the cockpit, scooping her up in a sobbing embrace. You did it," she whispered, shaking, tears soaking Emma's hair. Emma slumped against her mother, exhausted, shaking, eyes wide with disbelief. She had flown a plane, navigated a storm, landed, and taxied to safety, all at 11 years old. But even as the adrenaline began to ebb, a faint warning light blinked on the dashboard, a subtle reminder that the aircraft, storm, and emergency were not entirely over. Emma's breath hitched. The storm raged outside, engines hissed faintly, and she realized that in the world of flight, control was always temporary, and danger could strike again at any moment. For a brief moment, Emma allowed herself a small smile. They were alive. She had done the impossible, and yet deep inside she knew the skis were not finished testing her. Somewhere beyond the storm clouds, lightning flickered again, a soft rumble of thunder echoing like a warning. Emma Jensen, 11 years old, had just survived the impossible, but even as she stepped out of the cockpit, exhaustion and relief in equal measure, she understood that true courage was not just surviving. It was knowing that the challenge was never truly over. The plane had come to a halt, its massive frame gleaming under the flashing lights of emergency vehicles. Rain pelted the fuselage, thunder rattling the air, a constant reminder that the storm had not fully relinquished its grip. Passengers were escorted off the plane, shivering, soaked, yet alive. Flight attendants helped the shaken families, guiding them under umbrellas and toward waiting buses. Emma's mother held her tightly, whispering, "You're safe now, you're safe." For a brief moment, Emma let herself breathe. Her small body sagged with exhaustion, sweat and rain mingling on her forehead. But even as relief began to wash over her, a sudden, shrill alarm rang from the cockpit. The engine monitor flickered with red lights, warning of a potential fuel leak. Her mother froze, gripping Emma's shoulders. "No, not now." Emma's heart thudded painfully. She glanced at the panel, recognizing the symbol, a fuel pressure alert. Her mind raced. She had handled turbulence, crosswinds, landing, and taxiing, but a mechanical issue while passengers were disembarking could turn the airport into chaos. Without hesitation, she tugged her mother toward the cockpit, ignoring protests. "We have to check it," she said firmly, voice small but resolute. "We can't just leave it." Flight attendants and emergency personnel stared in disbelief as the 11-year-old girl climbed back into the cockpit. The engines hissed faintly, warning lights blinking. Emma's small fingers moved over the console, checking readings, following every step she had memorized from manuals she'd studied for months. She flipped switches, monitored pressure valves, and adjusted flow controls, each action deliberate, her focus absolute. The controller's voice crackled through her headset. "Flight 487, we see the alert. Don't touch the engines unnecessarily. Follow the emergency procedure checklist. You're in the safest position right now. Calmly monitor the situation." Emma nodded, even though he couldn't see her. Her eyes flicked from the gauges to the exterior, spotting a small puddle of fuel beginning to form beneath the left engine. A hiss of leaking liquid made her stomach twist. "We can't let this spread," she thought. She quickly toggled the auxiliary pumps, reducing pressure in the affected engine, and watched the reading stabilize. A sudden gust of wind rattled the plane violently, shaking the wings even as she focused on the mechanical issue. Thunder rattled the emergency lights. She swallowed, forcing herself to remain calm. She was small, young, and exhausted, but she was the only person with the knowledge and courage to manage the situation. Emergency personnel outside began shouting, unsure if the situation was under control. One man pointed at the fuel pooling beneath the wing. "Do we evacuate again?" Another shouted. The airport's emergency lights reflected off the rain-soaked tarmac in a chaotic strobe, adding to the tension. Emma's mother whispered from behind her, voice trembling. "Emma, maybe we should step back." Emma shook her head, eyes locked on the monitor. "I can do this, it's just a small leak. I know what to do, trust me." Minutes passed, though they felt like hours. Emma toggled switches, monitored pressure, and listened carefully to the subtle sounds of the engines. The hiss gradually lessened, the red lights flickered and dimmed. She let out a shaky breath. The immediate danger was contained. The passengers already waiting on buses had begun to notice the flurry of activity at the gate. Whispers traveled quickly. "That girl, she's still in the cockpit. She's fixing the plane." Cameras began appearing from pockets and purses, flashes illuminating the drenched tarmac. Emma barely noticed. She was still immersed in the task, eyes scanning readings, hands poised for any unexpected changes. Then another warning light blinked, this one more insistent: hydraulic pressure in the left landing gear. The previous stress had been managed, but this was new. Emma's heart skipped. If the landing gear had an issue while stationary, emergency crews could lose control. She quickly flipped the emergency valve, cycling the hydraulics, monitoring the indicator. The gauge slowly stabilized. Her mother exhaled, leaning against the cockpit doorframe, shaking. "Emma, you've already done enough." Emma shook her head, voice firm despite exhaustion. "If we leave it now, it could explode. We can't risk it." The rain continued, relentless, blurring the lights of fire trucks, emergency vehicles, and airport personnel. Lightning flashed, illuminating Emma's small frame in the cockpit, sweat and rain dripping down her face, eyes wide, focused, determined. Every muscle in her body was tense, every nerve alert. She felt every vibration, every warning, every pulse of the aircraft like it was a living thing. "Emma," the controller said, voice urgent, "we can guide you through shutting down the remaining systems safely. Follow my instructions step by step." She nodded, "I'm listening." Step by step, she followed the instructions. Engine pressure stabilized. Hydraulic pressure normalized. Fuel leak indicators returned to safe levels. The plane groaned under her careful attention but did not falter. Outside, emergency crews began lowering chutes and placing fire extinguishers, ready in case the worst happened. Then a new problem: the storm had shifted. Stronger gusts pushed at the tail, rocking the plane even as it sat idle. Emma felt the aircraft sway slightly, metal creaking under stress. She adjusted flaps, countered wind pressure with small rudder inputs, and monitored the instruments. The plane shuddered, then stabilized. She exhaled slowly, muscles trembling from tension. Emergency personnel outside began murmuring in disbelief. She's keeping it under control," one shouted. Another shook his head. "It's impossible, a kid." Emma's mother knelt beside her, tears streaming. "You're incredible. You've done more than anyone could imagine." But Emma didn't respond with words. She simply kept watching the monitors, hands poised over switches, ready for the next crisis. Because in the world of aviation, danger never fully sleeps. And as the storm raged on, lightning illuminating the drenched tarmac, Emma Jensen, 11 years old, realized that surviving the skis wasn't about landing or taxiing. It was about constant vigilance, courage, and refusing to surrender even when the odds were impossible. Finally, the alarms quieted. The fuel leak was contained. Hydraulic pressure normalized. The storm's gusts continued, but the plane remained stable. Emma leaned back slightly, exhausted, breathing ragged. Emergency crews outside began lowering safety barriers, approaching the plane cautiously, ready to assist. For a moment, the world seemed to exhale with her. Passengers and crew alike whispered prayers of thanks. Cameras clicked, recording the unbelievable sight of a small girl managing a massive commercial aircraft through disaster after disaster. Her mother hugged her tightly, whispering, "You're a hero." Emma, still trembling, let herself smile faintly, though the tension lingered. She had faced the storm, landed the plane, taxied it to safety, and now contained mechanical failures that could have turned into catastrophe. She had done the impossible. And somewhere beyond the clouds, the storm continued to rage, a reminder that the skies are unforgiving. Emma Jensen, 11 years old, had survived and thrived through a sequence of challenges that would terrify even the most experienced pilots. But she knew the world of flight was not yet done testing her resolve. Even grounded, even exhausted, the danger and the courage it demanded was never truly over. Emma Jensen stepped out of the cockpit, rain dripping from her soaked hair, her small body trembling from exhaustion. The plane behind her loomed like a steel giant, battered by storms and yet intact, a testament to the impossible feat she had just accomplished. Emergency personnel circled the aircraft, checking for residual risks, nodding in disbelief at what a single 11-year-old had managed to survive and control. Passengers emerged from the aircraft in groups, shaking, soaked, but alive. Children clutched parents' hands, eyes wide with awe, still trying to comprehend the girl who had flown them through life-threatening turbulence. The cabin crew whispered among themselves, repeating phrases like, "I can't believe she did this," and she's a child." The airport was now a flurry of activity. Police, firefighters, and airport security arrived on the scene, sirens wailing, lights flashing. News helicopters buzzed overhead, capturing every image of the drenched tarmac, the massive aircraft, and the small girl at the center of it all. Cameras clicked, flashes illuminated her rain-soaked frame, and journalists clamored to get a glimpse of the child who had captured the attention of the world. Emma's mother kept a protective arm around her, guiding her through the chaos. "Emma, it's okay," she whispered. "You're safe now. They're here to help." But Emma barely heard. Her mind was still racing, checking, calculating, analyzing. Even on the ground, she couldn't let herself relax completely. The plane's engine still hissed faintly, emergency systems were still active, and even one minor misstep in protocol could cause disaster. Yet she allowed herself a fleeting moment of awe, realizing the magnitude of what she had done. Suddenly, a commotion erupted near the entrance of the tarmac. Reporters and photographers surged forward, microphones thrust toward her. "Emma, how did you do it?" shouted one. "Did you know you could fly the plane?" another asked. Emma's eyes widened, unsure how to respond. Her small hands clutched her mother's arm. Her mother bent down, whispering fiercely, "You don't have to answer them yet. Just stay with me." A police officer stepped forward, holding a megaphone. "Everyone back. Give the girl space. She's a minor." But the crowd was growing restless, hungry for answers, eager to witness a modern miracle. The flashes of cameras and the roar of helicopters overhead added to the tension, creating a surreal mix of awe and chaos. Emma took a shaky breath, glancing at the plane behind her. The memory of the storm, the turbulence, the alarms, and the roaring engines surged back, sharp as knives. She had faced death and survived, yet now she faced another type of pressure, the weight of expectation, attention, and public scrutiny. Her small body trembled with exhaustion, but her mind remained sharp. "Ma'am," a senior airport official said to her mother, voice low but urgent, "we need to move her away from the media. She's exhausted and at risk of trauma. She's 11. We need to get her somewhere safe." Emma's mother nodded, relief flooding her features. "Yes, thank you." She guided Emma toward a waiting vehicle, keeping her close, shielding her from the flashbulbs and shouting reporters. Yet even as they moved, Emma's mind couldn't stop racing. The plane still needed checks, systems still needed monitoring, and she could not shake the sense of responsibility. Inside the vehicle, Emma sank into the seat, exhausted. Her small hands fidgeted with her wet hair, and her mother held her tightly, whispering reassurances. "You did everything perfectly." But Emma shook her head slightly, her eyes distant. What if something else goes wrong?" she whispered. Her voice trembled. "I can't just stop now." Her mother held her closer, stroking her hair. "You've done enough, Emma, enough for anyone's lifetime. You saved lives. You've done more than anyone could ever imagine." Outside, the airport staff continued to manage the scene. Engineers checked the aircraft, firefighters and police coordinated security, and news crews captured every moment. Social media exploded with updates. Videos of Emma in the cockpit went viral, hashtags of support and awe trending worldwide. People across the country were stunned. A child had faced one of the most dangerous situations imaginable and survived with courage and brilliance. But Emma wasn't thinking about fame. She wasn't thinking about the cameras or the news helicopters. Her mind was still on the plane, the instruments, the emergency warnings, the turbulence, and the lives she had carried through the storm. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that the skis would never forgive complacency. Suddenly, a technician approached the vehicle holding a tablet. "Miss Jensen," he said politely, "we're reviewing the cockpit logs. We need your input on a few emergency procedures to ensure everything is safe. It's routine, but we'd appreciate your guidance." Emma looked up, eyes wide, exhausted but resolute. "Okay," she whispered. She could barely stand fatigue, but her sense of responsibility outweighed it. Even now, she felt the weight of duty pressing down, the echo of alarms and storm winds still ringing in her mind. Meanwhile, the media frenzy intensified. Helicopters hovered, reporters shouted questions, and live broadcasts spread her story across the nation. Social media exploded with clips, small hands on yokes, focused eyes scanning instruments, a girl defying the odds and controlling a Boeing 737 with courage and precision. Viewers were mesmerized. Comments poured in. "This is unreal. She's a hero. Unbelievable courage for anyone, let alone a child." Emma's mother sighed, exhausted and overwhelmed herself, but proud beyond measure. She realized the world was witnessing a modern miracle. And yet, for Emma, the relief was tempered with lingering adrenaline, a feeling that she could not truly rest. Not yet. Inside the airport vehicle, Emma's mind drifted back to the cockpit, to the alarms, the fuel leak, the turbulence. The adrenaline still hummed, a reminder that even extraordinary courage could not erase fear completely. And in that moment she realized she had changed. She had faced death, mastered fear, and emerged alive. And yet she also understood that courage was not about accolades. It was about responsibility, vigilance, and the willingness to act when every second counted. Outside, the storm began to subside slowly, the first rays of sunlight cutting through heavy clouds. But the aftermath remained chaotic, the airport in controlled disarray, emergency crews coordinating, news helicopters circling, and crowds gathering to witness the scene. Emma's story would dominate headlines, dominate social media, and capture the imagination of millions. But inside the vehicle, she remained a small girl, exhausted, processing the reality of what she had survived. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet, unshakable thought lingered. The skis would call again. The storm had passed, but Emma Jensen, 11 years old, had glimpsed the true weight of responsibility, courage, and survival. And she knew, somehow, that this was only the beginning of her journey. The world was watching. The storm had been conquered. The plane was safe. But Emma's story, the girl who had flown the impossible, was just beginning to unfold. The sun finally broke through the storm clouds, casting a fragile glow across the wet tarmac. The Boeing 737 sat like a monument to survival, still steaming slightly from engines worked beyond their limits, yet intact. Emergency vehicles lined the taxiway, lights flashing, their sirens finally silenced as crews confirmed the aircraft was secure. Emma Jensen, small and soaked, sat quietly in the airport vehicle, her body trembling from exhaustion but her mind still alert. The world was watching her, yet she felt a strange sense of detachment, like the entire day had happened to someone else. Her mother held her close, whispering again and again, "You're safe, Emma. You did it. You saved everyone." But Emma's eyes remained distant, replaying the events of the past hours like a high-speed film. The collapse of the pilots, the roaring engines, the lightning striking dangerously close, the fuel leak warning, the crosswinds, and the landing that had tested every ounce of courage she possessed. Reporters surged toward the vehicle once more, eager for a statement. Microphones were shoved near her face. "Emma, how did you do it?" one shouted. "Did you think you could survive?" another asked. "Do you realize what the entire world is saying about you?" Emma's small hand went up, shaking slightly. She whispered, I just did what I had to." There was no bravado, only the quiet steel of someone who had stared death in the face and acted without hesitation. Her mother's arms tightened around her. "She's a hero," she said softly, "but she's still just a child." Across the tarmac, engineers finished final checks on the aircraft. The fuel leak had been fully contained. Hydraulic systems stabilized. Emergency crews gave nods of approval. The plane, battered by storms and chaos, had survived largely because of one small, determined girl. And yet, the full weight of what she had accomplished was only beginning to sink in for the adults around her. The media frenzy intensified. Helicopters hovered, lights flashing, cameras rolling, capturing the small figure of Emma Jensen, 11 years old, drenched, exhausted but unbroken. Clips of her gripping the yoke, concentrating on every gauge, adjusting flaps, countering turbulence, and finally landing the plane had gone viral almost instantly. Social media exploded. Girl pilot Emma Jensen trending globally. Millions watched in awe, disbelief, and admiration. Commentators speculated on her bravery, her intelligence, and her uncanny composure. But Emma didn't care about the cameras or the applause. Her focus remained narrow, razor-sharp, the lives she had just protected. She thought of the passengers, the children, the flight attendants, her mother, and every decision she had made under the pressure of life-and-death stakes. "I did it. We're alive," she thought quietly, the enormity of that simple truth washing over her. Airport officials finally guided her and her mother to a safe area, away from the crowd. They were met with blankets, hot drinks, and first aid supplies, though Emma had little need for them beyond the warmth they provided. She sank into a chair, shivering, exhausted to her bones. Her hands still trembled slightly, and her mother's arms wrapped around her in a protective embrace. Minutes later, the senior airport official approached, flanked by engineers and emergency personnel. "Emma, the cockpit logs, the passenger safety reports, and our own assessments confirm what we suspected," he said. "Your actions were extraordinary. You demonstrated composure, intelligence, and courage far beyond your years. You literally saved lives today." Emma's lips trembled. She could barely manage words. I did what I had to." The official nodded, smiling warmly. "And yet that was more than anyone could have hoped for. You are officially being recognized for your bravery and quick thinking. Today, the world witnessed something remarkable. Today, Emma Jensen became a hero." The words sank in slowly. A sense of awe, pride, and disbelief washed over her. She had flown a plane, survived a violent storm, managed mechanical failures, landed safely, taxied to a safe position, and handled emergencies, all before most adults would even dare to think about it. And now the world was calling her a hero. Outside, the last of the passengers boarded buses, heading to the terminal, shaken but alive. Some stopped to wave, clapping silently, whispering thanks to the girl who had flown the impossible. Others recorded videos on their phones, capturing the moment for posterity. Flight attendants hugged each other, some wiping tears from their eyes. And through it all, Emma sat quietly, processing what had happened, her small hand still clutching the edge of her chair. A news crew approached her with microphones. "Emma," the reporter began, "millions around the world are watching. Do you realize how extraordinary this is? Do you have any message for them?" Emma hesitated. Her voice was quiet but firm. "Sometimes when something terrible happens, you just have to act. You can't wait. You can't panic. You just do what you can and you help people, that's all." Her words rippled through the crowd, through social media, and across the world. People listened, captivated not just by the act itself, but by the wisdom, bravery, and humility of someone so young. Then in the distance, a faint rumble echoed, not thunder, not the storm, but the distant engines of incoming aircraft. Emma's gaze shifted instinctively. The skies, vast and unpredictable, would always hold risks, but she had learned something profound. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. And she knew now that even the most impossible challenges could be faced with determination, focus, and heart. Her mother hugged her again, whispering, "You've changed the world today, Emma. Never forget what you did." Emma smiled faintly, exhausted but alive, understanding for the first time that the events of the day had irrevocably altered her life. The world would never forget her. The passengers would never forget her. And she would carry the lessons of courage, responsibility, and quick thinking forever. Emergency crews finally cleared the area, the plane secured for final inspection, the storm fully receding. Emma and her mother were escorted to a waiting vehicle, cameras capturing every moment. And as they drove away, the sun broke fully through the clouds, casting a warm light over the tarmac. The world seemed to pause, almost in reverence for the girl who had faced the impossible. Emma Jensen, 11 years old, had flown a plane through chaos, mastered fear, and survived a storm that would have terrified even seasoned pilots. But more than survival, she had demonstrated the essence of heroism, courage, responsibility, and selflessness. And though the day had ended, her story was just beginning. The headlines, the social media posts, the awe of millions around the world would follow her forever. But Emma, small, soaked, and trembling, understood something deeper. True courage is measured not by fame or recognition, but by the quiet knowledge that you faced fear, acted decisively, and saved lives when it mattered most. For a brief moment, the world seemed to stand still. And in that pause, an 11-year-old girl who had faced the impossible understood the truth. Some challenges define a lifetime, and some people, no matter their age, define history.